Hello, my name is James and I'm the Mayor of Jamestown. This week we have a single game to review this time around, although the same can't be said about next week where we're actually getting two. Unfortunately, I may be a tad distracted with Cyberpunk 2077, but we'll see what the week brings. Hopefully, no more delays. Anyways, onto the breakdown and then onto the review. To keep things nice and simple, I've got a three-tiered ranking system in the form of a traffic light, all in an excuse to simplify what games are a good or bad use of your time. Red is for those games that I really wouldn't recommend bothering to play and would arguably be considered not a good use of your time. Yellow is a comfortable medium where the game is a recommendation for some, all depending on the type of game that you're looking for. I'd argue that these games are worth your time but aren't a must play right now type of situation. Green is going to be a glowing recommendation and is an award for those games that I'd argue are a must play / pick up as soon as you can. Usually a lot of fun and most definitely worth your time. Now that we're on to the review, what is this week's game that we all get to enjoy? Well, that would be the indie classic known only as Cave Story Plus. With the Plus version I suspect is just the modern update to the game's original release. The game was free to pick up from the 3rd of December 2020 all the way up to the 10th of December 2020. Originally developed by Studio Pixel and released on the 20th of December 2004, Cave Story is available on PC, PSP, Wii, DS, Switch, Linux, Amiga, and macOS. For obvious reasons, I'll be playing the PC version. Cave Story, as originally developed, was designed to be a love letter to classic Metroidvania games, such as Metroid and Castlevania, unsurprisingly. The game plays just like any good Metroidvania in a classic 2D platformer sense. It's a pretty standard Metroidvania title, one that has been dubbed an indie classic for years to come, and I intend to find out if this statement still holds up today. In terms of the gameplay, what can be expected with Cave Story? Well, as with any Metroidvania, you're tasked with exploring your surroundings, interacting with characters, discovering secrets, and acquiring new upgrades to help along your progression. It's all relatively simple stuff, and Cave Story does it really well. One thing not every game in the genre manages to do, however, is a sense of exploration and wonder you can create by doing that exploration. I'm not the type of person that always gets stuck into the exploration of a game due to it not giving me the progression I'm looking for. Cave Story, on the other hand, managed to do exactly the opposite of that. Exploring feels natural, and it makes me want to avoid doing the main objective, at least until I've discovered everything I could find at the time. For instance, there was a sequence where you could snuff out fireplaces to make some progression. If I recall, 2 out of 3 were related to the story, but there was a third that I remembered back in the starting village. I then went on to do that fireplace, and voila! I had a lovely new gun I wouldn't have had otherwise. The gun wasn't amazing by any means, but it was something new that I wouldn't have gained unless I had decided to go out of my way to do it. It's not a weapon that has any requirement to the story or exploration, but it was still there for me to grab, and if I didn't go looking for something, I never would have found it in the first place. Typically, if a game manages to actually give me reasons to go out of my way off of the beaten track, then I'm impressed, because it isn't always easy to permeate my gaming stubbornness. Speaking of the weapons, Cave Story has a rather interesting mechanic with all of the weapons that you can acquire. Each weapon starts off at level 1 and can be upgraded to level 3, with each level becoming stronger than the last. To level up your weapons, you have to defeat an enemy, and if they drop experience in the form of yellow crystals, you can collect them with whatever weapon you currently have selected. Collect enough and the weapon will level up, causing more damage, extending the range, possibly increasing the rate of fire, and even changing its mechanics at times. One weapon you collect in the sand zone can be leveled up all the way to level 3, and then it will propel you off the ground and lift you into the air indefinitely until you run out of ammo. It was great fun discovering this and realising just how much more potential this weapon had as a result of this one upgrade. The caveat to this system though is if you get a bit too cheeky and aggressive, causing you to take damage, your currently equipped weapon will lose experience, resulting in eventual level downs, something that can be a real detriment when your favourite weapon has shrunk down to level 1 during a boss fight. Best of luck on that one. The weapons that you'll be levelling are all fun and unique, with each one having their own different uses. For example, the bubble gun I found at level 3 can be used as a weird sort of bubble shield, or the rocket launcher can be used for excessive damage, has the caveat of limited ammo. Weapons are a lot of fun to use and don't really stop being satisfying unless you drop down a level and you're no longer doing the same amount of damage that you once were. Arguably, the best part of the game for me was finding one of these weapons only to discover for the first time what they do at level 2 and especially level 3. There really is a lot to enjoy with this game, especially for those that enjoy the genre, that's for sure. No game is perfect however, and there are a couple of grievances that I've come across during my playtime. One issue I initially found when playing the game was the lack of native controller options. I understand that the game was originally designed for PC, but the genre itself revels and excels through the use of a controller. You'd have a lot more control over your character and precision jumps wouldn't be quite so awkward at times. Speaking of which, your character can be pretty bloody slidey a lot of the time and can make those precise platforms a touch too difficult to stay on when you're not quite used to compensating for that slidiness just yet. Going back to the controller problem, I'm sure there's a third-party software out there that can be used to bypass this problem, but it would be nice to at the very least have controller support as a native option. After all, the game is also available on the Switch, so a quick little update wouldn't exactly hurt. In the long run though, the game was originally designed for the PC, and while it might be a tad irritating trying to get to grips with the precision of platforming and shooting on a keyboard, you're going to have to get used to it. Another very minor gripe I found with Cave Story is that if you're in a cutscene just before a boss, you can't skip it. You can merely spam tap your way out of it faster, but there's no outright way to skip it. A feature like this would have been nice, especially after I, myself, died several times to the boss in Sand Zone. With every death it resulted in having to skip through the text and watch the NPCs go through their animations. After seeing it for the first time, having a skip option would have been a pleasant extra. Bosses in the game aren't particularly difficult though, so you're not going to be spending hours trying to defeat a singular boss, but in the meantime, you're trying to perfect their pattern, you don't want to have to keep watching that cutscene. In terms of the visuals, Cave Story has a really nice 16-bit aesthetic that is very reminiscent of something like Castlevania. Each character and environment has their own personality and design to them that makes them unique, such as the evil scientist or the badass king. As a result, each character has exactly that. Character. Admittedly, some of the environments can get a bit samey after a while, especially for the background art, but thankfully you don't tend to notice when there's a barrage of bullets coming your way. Levels themselves have a memorable design to them, and at no point did I find myself getting confused on where I needed to go, what to do, or whatever else. Level design was simple, but on point for Cave Story, and it made the whole experience a lot more pleasant throughout. The only really glaring issue I can find with this game's visuals is the fact that it's not updated to have a widescreen stretch feature. In the options, you can decide to play the game in its original resolution, or a slightly stretched resolution that will fill the screen 4:3. As of the writing of this review, there is no 16:9 option for the game, which honestly would have been a nice extra. I understand not wanting to have the game appear stretched out to some degree, but having the option at the very least would have been nice. Outside of this one issue, I can't really fault the game from a visual perspective. I mean, if you're tired of pixel art, then sure, you won't like the game's art style, but considering the game is technically 16 years old at this point, the aesthetics still hold up to this day without a single shadow of a doubt. Moving on to the story, for the sake of spoilers, I'm going to keep the story real brief. You play an unnamed player character who awaits within a cave with absolutely no memory whatsoever. After discovering Mimiga Village, said character gets wrapped up in a plot to stop this mysterious doctor who keeps kidnapping the villagers of this town in search of a Mimiga, a bunny, called Sue. From there, the plot spirals, and with each new NPC you come into contact with, you learn more about the world, its previous war involving robots, humans, Mimigas, and the mysterious red flowers. The further you get into the game, the more the story starts to make sense, and elements of the world that you inhabit starts to make more and more sense to you as the player. As a result of this, the story quickly becomes quite engaging, while being easy to follow, and it becomes hard to pull yourself away from the game when you still have multiple questions that you need answers to. Ironically enough, a game called Cave Story has an engaging story revolving around being stuck in a cave. How surprising. When it comes to the sound design with this game, I am one very happy man. Starting off with the sounds your weapons make, they're all really satisfying sound effects that only increase in satisfaction when they connect with an enemy. You'll be hearing them a lot, so it makes sense that they sound so punchy and enjoyable from start to finish. Just like the rest of the game, the music is good. It's damn good. It honestly reminds me of the original 2D Sonic games and just how good their original soundtrack was. When battling bosses, the chiptune music ramps up and becomes intense, just how you want it to be. When interacting with NPCs in a safe space, it's calm, relaxing, with no unnecessary stress added unless the story requires it. Yet, when out exploring, it has a sense of wonderment to it, while still having enough intensity to keep the adrenaline running. Here, just listen to this. I legitimately sat here for about 3 to 5 minutes listening to this and jiving to this track the first time I heard it. It had me so pumped for the upcoming boss fight, and it simply cemented my feelings for just how well done the soundtrack is for this game as a whole. In conclusion, Cave Story took me by surprise. I knew that the game was considered an indie classic to many, but I wasn't sure how I was going to take it. From playing the game, it turns out that I really enjoyed my time with Cave Story. Yeah, it has a couple of small issues here and there, such as the lack of 16:9, no controller support, and the slidiness of the main character, but I quickly got over it due to just how enjoyable the whole venture was. There wasn't a weapon I didn't enjoy using, there wasn't an environment I didn't want to explore, and with the story basically being drip fed to me, I simply needed to know more and more as time went on. Honestly, Cave Story is a great indie game I'm going to have to give a Traffic score of green. With this one, there was just so much to fall in love with, and with it being free for this week, it's hard not to recommend you give this one a go at the earliest possible convenience that you get. If you don't like 2D Metroidvania games, this probably isn't going to be the one that converts you, but it just might come close if you give it a go. Once again, thanks to everyone for sticking around this long. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that goodness. Next week, Epic Games is giving out 2 games, Pillars of Eternity, the Definitive Edition, and Tyranny, the Gold Edition. I sadly probably won't have time to cover them, what with Cyberpunk coming out that same day, hopefully. If that changes, expect the weekly reviews to still be on, however. Providing my PC doesn't give up the ghost by the release of Cyberpunk, I do intend to do an eventual review on it, so keep an eye out on that one. Until then though, I've been James, the Mayor of Jamestown, and once more, I'm signing off. Goodbye.